Okay, so this video is on the internet centralization. It was originally started as a Sybil attack video, but originally started as this. We had to expand the scope, and we're going to include the shift that happened in the internet. That happened in the internet. The internet, which started as decentralized, moved to a centralized model, and we'll see how the threat of Sybil attacks helped push this transformation along. So we'll start with the beginning of the internet, and this slide, moving it around. So when the internet started, in 1969, it was just these two machines connected together. And this is from, and we covered this in a previous video on the origins of the internet. And then within 2 years, there were more than a dozen a dozen connections within 2 years, and you can loosely call this the internet. So here we have the dozen plus computers in 1971, and then by 1985, there were over 2,000 machines all connected to one another. But then also during this time span, as the internet was growing, it started encountering these problems, which started forcing new solutions and forcing change, which led us to a top-down style of architecture. So we're going to look now at the difference between these two constructs. So here, with two computers will communicate directly with one another. This is called peer-to-peer communication. Each computer here has also voluntarily adopted the same standards and protocols so they can all talk back and forth with no issues. And then lastly, anyone can come and go from this. Anyone can join or leave this network at will. But as more people started using this, this construct started to get attacked. And I think we all know what spam is. And then we had denial of service. This is where you flood or you inundate some user, and you're basically blocking all of their communications, so they can't talk out, they can't receive in. And we'll talk more about the sybil at the end of this video, but for now, just know that we have one computer in charge making a bunch of fake sock puppets and pretending these are real users in the network to try to have an outsized influence on the network. So then we had this 30-year period where the internet morphed into more of a centralized service. And what the trusted third party looks like is we have this centralized provider here. This provider knows all of the users. It knows that this user is a real person, and they have this provider has a pre-established security connection with all of the users. And it's the provider that sets up a secure link when these two users, for example, who have both been authenticated by the provider, now want to talk to each other. And they're going to use the same data standards as the rest of the internet with the common internet, Wi-Fi, wireless, and so on. They'll be using all the same standards. And this is what's called a trusted third party. It's here we have the users. So I'm sorry, the trusted third party. So it's sending the data back and forth to each user. So it's got a connection with the users, but it's also helping the users build this secure channel between themselves that they can use now to talk to each other securely. And this apparatus will protect these users from the sybil, from spam attacks, denial of service, and so on. They're protected from all of that. And this third party is a key point. This is a centralized power essentially over all the users in the network, and the concepts like this require trust. We have to trust this third party, and this is the antithesis of what cryptographers like to see. They call these single points of failure. The ideal systems do not have single points of failure. So this quote here is from the Bitcoin white paper, and we know that Bitcoin allows this peer-to-peer transaction channel to happen, and that a trusted third party is not needed with Bitcoin. So instead of that, all users maintain a ledger of all the data sent. Plus, there's this proof of work protocol, but they all share the same protocols. And with the Bitcoin network, you get all of the same security benefits. And with the security, we also have now every user has consensus and all the data sent, it's financial data. There's no trust required. And actually, the default is the opposite. The nodes by default do not trust any other node on the network. So coming back now to our decentralized versus centralized. So this is how we started. 1994, Netscape was the first implementation of this, and this construct would become the de facto standard before the end of the century. And just for a quick example, we're going to bring this back to our Paxos example, our Paxos model. This is a distributed system working to maintain agreement. So we're going to move these two. And now when these nodes, these missile defense, command and control stations are communicating back and forth, they are also using this third-party construct. So the data being sent between all the nodes here is happening in a secure pathway that's set up by a third party. And these message exchanges also have all of the aforementioned security benefits. So now lastly, to sybil attacks. It's essentially these nodes are just pretending to be real users, real independent users on the network. And we'll do a small example. So this is a fact that in 1975, one of the nodes that you could connect to on the internet held up-to-date weather data for all of the United States. And okay, so now I'm making the rest of this up. So this node did probably have some kind of limit to how often it would let users access this data. This was back when transmission was very slow. And the idea was we would want every user on the network to have some kind of equal access to this data. We want this data to be shared equally amongst all the users. But we have this user who could go and make 4 extra nodes. These are essentially fake nodes. They're called sock puppets. And they're going to pretend to be real users, and they're going to get way more than their fair share of access to this weather data. And essentially, they're stealing the resources from the other guys. And this problem grew very quickly because of the disparity that you find in computing machines. So relatively speaking, it's not too expensive to go and buy a supercomputer, something that's 100 times faster than this here normal computer. And now this problem gets way out of hand. This user here has much outsized influence on the network. So the internet started. It was an open system. Anyone can come and go, decentralized, peer-to-peer, permissionless. But as these threats start evolving, the tools that are coming to be that users have to have, they're starting to get more and more complex, more and more expensive. In some cases, you needed very specialized hardware, and also generally you needed knowledge and expertise, experience, and skills, and so on, in order to protect yourself as a user in this network. So in 1994, Netscape centralized this need. It took all the security need, put it on their shoulders, and now any internet user, and after that happened, any internet user that was using Netscape, they were protected from all these threats, and they just relied on Netscape. They trusted them to do all of the heavy lifting with respect to security.